Welcome everybody. This is a podcast that the purpose of this podcast is to foster pro-social behavior. And we're going to discuss all sorts of different topics and bring it always back around to how we can foster pro-social behavior, because we see that as fundamental to human survival. And one of the main ways to do that is to talk about, to raise awareness about fundamental human needs, and we're going to talk a bit about that in every episode. And so, well, it's really exciting for us to start this. This is something that we've been wanting to do for years now, and finally we're giving it a go. So today the episode is mostly going to be focused on artificial intelligence. And we're going to just discuss different points together. And please let us know if you have any opinions or comments about what we talk about. Tell us in the comments below. Well, sorry, I would first, suppose we should introduce ourselves first. So I'm Marcus Packard. I'm president of the Pro-Socialize Foundation. And so that's why we're working on fostering pro-social behavior. That's what we do as a foundation. And my co-host is Paul Packard.
Yep. I'm involved in education. I teach. I used to do research in neuroscience, and I also participate and help Marcus out with his company and his foundation.
I think what's very interesting to keep in mind is that you have a doctorate in neuroscience. Mm-hmm. And then you also got a postdoc in Germany.
Yep. Yeah. I have a PhD in psychology and neuroscience, and I did research several years in neuroscience and psychology and about memory in Germany and also in Barcelona.
My background, I have an education in engineering and electrical engineering, and but I didn't practice it very long. I did work in that for a few years, but very quickly I realized that I had to dedicate my life to fostering pro-social behavior, and exactly how to do that I've been learning over something like 15 years now. So that's my specialty now, and I'm also specialized in cryptocurrency and Web3 as well, but that's not really relevant here. So one of the things that I was interesting is that I find interesting. So when we've been following different people that talk a lot about AI, right? And there's opposing takes. You know, some people believe that we will for sure be all killed by AI, right? So that's like the take of Elijah Bukowski. He's somewhat famous for that. And then there are others that are very that are accelerationists, right? So some that come to mind are Beff Jezos, that's what he goes by. And there's a very famous YouTuber named David Shapiro, who's been doing excellent presentations on YouTube about artificial intelligence and the need to transition to a post-labor economy. And I highly recommend his videos. They're very, very good. There's some very interesting things that I'd like to talk about that he mentions in his latest video. So David Shapiro, it's very interesting because he believes that we are about to we're going to experience a hard takeoff, which is essentially what it's like the what some people call as the singularity, right? That there's going to be like a 0 to 1 phase, and at the same time, he is very optimistic about what AI will bring. Now, feel free to cut me off if you ever if you have anything to say.
Well, I get so the thing. Okay, so whenever I hear about the singularity, Because basically, as I understand it, it means exponential rate of improvement in AI efficiency, and I get the concept. I just don't. I haven't heard what is their argument for being sure that that is possible. Like the concept makes sense. Okay, you get something that can make a better version of itself, so it'll always get better, but. Yeah. So how are they so sure that that is possible?
Yeah. So it's interesting. David, he talks about diminishing returns and natural limitations. So that would be what would be like slowing that down, right? That would lead to a progressive takeoff or a slow takeoff or not even a takeoff, right? Like we just improve in general our productivity and that'd be it, right? And there are he outlines some diminishing returns and natural limitations like energy, like compute power, and things like that, and other possible ones that are possible. Like collection of data, and it's really interesting. But then he believes that the compounding returns are going to overcome that, and the quantum leaps. Like he believes that there are going to be significant quantum leaps, and by quantum leaps, he uses a different term, but what he means is that like there are moments where there's like a 0 to a 1. Like if, for instance, fusion energy were discovered, right, or quantum computing would exist, right? So those are like quantum leaps in which all our capacity is greatly improved, and then right. So that would more than compensate the natural limitations and diminishing return problem.
Okay, yeah. Okay, but again, well, the quantum computing. I think Beff Jezos. From what I remember him explaining, he's one of the most important accelerationists, right? Mm-hmm. And I think he used to work on quantum computing.
Yes,
and,
he did. Yeah.
And from what I understood, he sort of realized that it's not that easy as it. I think from what I understood, he thinks it's not as promising as some people make it out to be. He thinks the big leap will be in other areas. And again, quantum computing is one of those things that, but from what I understand correctly, like quantum computing, if it works, it would also break all of crypto, and it would break because then it would be possible to hack anything.
Well, so some people are concerned about that, but other people explain why there isn't much concern, because it would, before breaking crypto, they'd break all sorts of other things, so that they'd hack into all sorts of defense systems and all sorts of other systems that are more important and more valuable than crypto is, right? So and crypto could easily upgrade to solve that. That's what I understand. But I see what you're saying, that you don't really think that the quantum leaps are that significant.
Well,
that
I guess
or probable.
So I think when you look at quantum leaps in history, in the advance of technology, there have been, but I think it's very hard to predict what impact they will have. So he's saying that the quantum leaps will. So a quantum leap here, what is in computer science or in anything?
Things. Yeah, like there are different things in which there could be quantum leaps. But for instance, if there's a quantum leap in, for instance, in energy, right? So for instance, if fusion were possible, then the amount of energy, there'd be almost unlimited energy, and that would allow like a lot more compute. There would be like no limitation to that.
Well, yeah, so I think what happens though is that it's just very difficult. It's hard enough to sort of make science advance within the current paradigm, but if you try to imagine what will happen in a future quantum leap, it just becomes a lot more speculative. It's the problems you'll find and the solutions. I just think it's very hard to sort of forecast that. And what I see here is I see it as sort of like he was just saying, okay, like he just sees it as a unidirectional kind of thing, and that will just help AI. I mean, okay, yeah, I get that, I get it, I understand that.
Yeah, and he also thinks that there's compounding returns. So like the more artificial intelligence there is, the more everything can progress. And it's not necessarily artificial intelligence that is creating new artificial intelligence, but it's helping us in all the other processes. So like in collecting data and what I find fascinating is that, and a bit concerning actually, is that he considers himself to be an optimist, right? He believes that AI will most likely bring about like a much better, humanity and society, but he also believes that there's a 20 to 30% chance of doom. And I think that there's like, unless you like are coming from a place of despair and you're trying to balance that, you're trying to balance despair, being optimistic with a 20 to 30% chance of doom for the entire planet or all of humanity is not sane. Like I think
it seems crazy. Yeah.
Right. Like.
Yeah.
So what and what that reminds me of, right? So what it makes me think of is that a lot, like the reason why people are optimistic or pessimistic, I think, is greatly influenced by their personal situation, right? So, David Shapiro and Beff Jezos, they are, they're doing very well today, right? They have, great jobs. They're very satisfied with their job. They're living in safe countries and safe areas, and so the system today has benefited them, and so I think that automatically makes you be like unconsciously you're optimistic, even though rationally you shouldn't be, right? Because and I think that is one of the situations that we're seeing, and we have to really keep that in mind.
Yeah. So for me, it reminds me a little bit of and some years ago they were saying that they were going to sequence the human genome, which they did, and that this would allow curing all of the diseases that humans had, and that it would also allow it would be very dangerous because it would allow like that movie Gattaca, it would usher in an era of all these ethical problems where you could have these people that are genetically very altered, and I'm not saying those things aren't problems, but they've sequenced the human genome, and it didn't happen. Like there wasn't a huge breakthrough, and I don't want to sound just pessimistic on these things but I do think that sometimes things are just more complicated than they might seem. Like I feel like a lot of these AI people, these tech people, they feel like they've got it all figured out. That sort of intelligence is computation.
Yeah. Well, so I think one of the reasons why they do feel that way is because that's kind of like what it's an asset for them to think that way for their job and to get funding, etc. Right? Which is something that's interesting because that's one thing that Beff Jezos points out. Like he's very open about the fact that he's optimistic as a premise, and he believes that pessimism is destructive, like always, like it's just very, very destructive and dangerous to be pessimistic. And so, and he says specifically that the optimism is like something that helps companies, startups actually achieve a lot. And there is a point to that, right? But
it's weird because in this case, the optimism, it sort of turns into pessimism because they're so optimistic about the potential of AI that then it makes them think that it would be so powerful that it would just destroy the world.
Well, no, okay, so Beff Jezos and David Shapiro, they're optimistic, right? Beff Jezos He's like a fanatic, and I think that he's forgetting a lot of things. It's weird because he considers consumption of energy to be the best measurement of progress, and I think that is clearly not the case because we just have to look at what happened to Easter Island. So he is very openly a believer in the present system, that it just improves everything, and capital is the best way to measure someone's contribution to society. And so logically, right, he is such an accelerationist because artificial intelligence is just accelerating, everything. That's what it does. It accelerates the present system. And I think that the present system is actually destroying the environment and destroying us in many ways. And I think that accelerating it is extremely dangerous. And this is the point that I think is very important to get across, is that unless we understand what our goal is as a society, we're just going to rush off a cliff, right?
Yeah, it seems to me that they're so they believe basically that advancing in technology is inevitable. They believe that it's also all powerful. And so in a way, and they believe that that's what they have to do, and if not, they won't do it, someone else will. And well, if you just looking at it psychologically, let's say, they seem obsessed basically with technology. Basically, if you compare them to other sectors of the population, now I'm not saying they're wrong, right? But I mean, I don't know up to what point. And again, when you start looking at them, it even seems insane in the sense that they're ready to participate in this kind of race that they think is probably going to doom the planet. At some point,
they think that there's a possibility, like in David's, situation. Like, he believes that there's a very significant possibility that it's going to destroy everything, and he still is. He actually believes that there's no way to slow it down. Like, it just can't. So he could be dealing with. Well, he's partially dealing with, fear, partially, coping with that, and partially just, reflecting his well-being today, like I said earlier.
Yeah, but he's not directly involved, as I understand, in the research or the advancement.
No, he isn't. No.
I mean, he's talking about it and maybe like educating people about it.
Yeah,
and maybe that can help it accelerate and so on.
And he is concerned about it, things going wrong, so that's why he's educating about it, right? So he,
And when I downplay it, I don't mean, I think AI can do a lot, right? And there could be a lot of risks and so on. It's just that I think, and I'm sure there's other people like that, right? But I would like to hear, okay. I'm just a bit skeptic about when it goes into basically where, God territory, because they're so obsessed with it, and then they say it's like all powerful, it's going to destroy everything. It starts to get
it's interesting. So it
starts to get, I don't know, like a religion or a cult or something.
So it's interesting. So Beff Jezos actually openly says that he for him accelerationism is a religion.
Right. Okay.
Like he says it very clearly.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I find interesting is that, concerning, right, is that both Beff Jezos and David Shapiro, they set a very simple objective as like what is good. Like, so Beff Jezos says that what's good is consumption of energy, which is, I think, insane. And then David Shapiro says that what we should be aiming for is understanding. And I think that understanding, so there's reason why I think that that's not a good enough aim, which is that basically understanding could be in every direction. And we see that today, right? We see that there are a lot of things that we have understood for a long time and that science has done very good work on, which, for instance, like the science of human needs. which we're going to talk a little bit later if we can. And it's just completely ignored. Like there's a lot of stuff that is just completely ignored and it's not really pursued. And so I think it's similar in this case. It's like, okay, understanding, so you're pursuing understanding, but of what, right? And so right now we have the understanding of what human needs are for people to be healthy and sane, right? Or a beginning of that. And we have to incorporate that right away, because if not, then we're just ignoring the understanding that we have, right? So you can't just make it a simple metric like that simple, because you're missing out what the understanding that you've actually made. Yeah. So another interesting that I find is so I think a good way to frame this. So before we get onto what we believe, or what I believe is a solution, and I think it's a very effective solution, is so one of the things that both David and Eliza do understand is the Moloch problem, and Beff Jezos does not at all. Like he doesn't even believe it exists. Which is the Moloch problem is like there are many different ways to talk about the Moloch problem. Moloch is like the name of a god, and Liv Bory popularized this idea, which is that it's a way to encompass the problem of, also called mutually assured destruction, or the multipolar trap, the race to the bottom. It's also what people understand as game theory, the need to align incentives. It's also the tragedy of the commons is also another form of this problem. The arms race is a form of this problem, and it's essentially basically, I think none of these people are actually realizing this, but essentially the problem is that we're forced to sacrifice the long-term good for the short-term gain so that we can get ahead in the competition for resources. So it's interesting because this is something that more and more people are aware of, but still a lot of people are not aware of, or they're aware of it, but they just choose to ignore it because they don't really know what to do, I guess. And anyway, so when we realize that that's the problem, right, which is a very easily formulated description of the problem, it's sacrificing the long-term good for the short-term gain, and that we have to do that. We have to do that because we are in a competition for resources for survival, right? So this the solution is very simple when we see it that way. It's to end the competition for resources. To end the competition for survival. And it's interesting that what I find interesting is that no one is coming to this conclusion. Like I feel like some people are they have kind of started to see it, but they're kind of afraid to say it because it changes the paradigm completely, right? It changes our paradigm. It changes the basic assumption that people have to earn their living, right? And that's kind of like all our society is structured that way. And there's an association with the end of that idea, right, with communism, which is like which is the end of our rights as an individual, and also like the kind of the other problem that people always talk about with communism, which I believe is true, is that when power is centralized so much, we lose the emergent intelligence of humanity as a whole, with all of us, making decisions within our own situations, and that only us understand the situation that we're in, and so it's instead of having billions of minds working, when power is centralized, there's only like a few minds working, maybe 100 minds working, and that and also I think what happens then is that there's too much there's misalignment because the incentives and the objectives are no longer aligned, because when it's only a few minds that have control, then their incentives are their own, right? Their objectives are their own, and it doesn't necessarily correspond. They're not necessarily the same ones as everyone else. Right. So I fully agree that that we have to avoid that, but that doesn't mean that we can't, and we don't have to. Like, that doesn't mean that we can't end the competition for resources, and we can't end the need to earn a living, because I think that's what we have to do. Like, we just, there's no way around it. Yeah, I don't know if you want to say something to that.
Sorry. Well, there was a lot of things. Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah. I guess so. For me, with the whole arms race thing, and this, it's very much related to the AI thing, because once they start, they see themselves as in a system, just like if it was the Cold War, right? And then they need to build more faster, stronger weapons than the enemies are, except that they're not the military. They're AI tech companies. But all of a sudden, every time it's like if they're seeing themselves more as if they were that, right? And so they're just changing roles, like in a very, I don't know, they're sort of like slipping into that role. I don't know if they're totally aware of that, but it's a big shift.
You mean that they're like they're people that are working in technology, and now they're taking the role of working in weapons industry.
Yeah, yeah. And I don't know if they talk about it like that, and they sounding more and more like that. And I don't know if they've realized this, or if I don't know if they're self-aware of that in that sense. Like, because, right, what would the next step be? I mean, I guess they believe that it's more efficient to work as, but then they're sort of sounding like if they're independent, company-owned, private-owned military technology, right? I don't know. I just think it's interesting. I wonder what they would think about that. But because I think a lot of people that go into tech, they're thinking about how to improve the world. And how to fix problems, solve problems, an engineer mindset. You solve problems, you improve the lives of people, and so on. And you get rewarded for that. But that's a very different idea than thinking about like defense, like national defense, or fighting against enemies. It's a different mentality or goals, that they just sort of slip into that. Because with the whole arms race thing, that's been something that politically people have been talking about for a while.
Yeah, absolutely. I also think it's kind of a cop-out, right? Because they're just allowing themselves to continue. It's just the same old cop-out as always. It's like, well, if someone else doesn't, if I don't do it, someone else will, right? And so it's just a cop-out to like allow themselves to continue doing whatever they want, basically.
Well, it's what the military says, too.
Right.
It's the same thing. It's just, yeah.
So you wanted to talk about laws of robotics, but I think we're running out of time. So I would like to just go into just a little bit. Do you have like 10 minutes or something?
Yeah, okay.
Okay, so basically I just wanted to talk a little more about this, like how we solve this, right? So how do we end the need to earn a living, right, without giving government full control over our lives? Well, essentially, we just have to raise awareness about how important it is to align everybody, to align our goals, and that's how we achieve AI alignment. We can't achieve AI alignment without achieving human alignment first, right? It's just impossible, right? So, and the only way that we can achieve human alignment is, like I said earlier, is that we end the competition for resources, right? And how do we do that? We accept the fact that we need to take care of everybody, absolutely everybody. And there's another way to reach that, and this is what I think is the most effective way to bring about this change, is raising awareness about human needs. And so that's how we can understand what our goal is as humanity. What does it mean to take care of other people, right? So basically what it means satisfying their needs or helping satisfy their needs. And this is okay. So I think that the important part is this concept, right? The concept of human needs is absolutely necessary, and most people don't have this concept yet. Basically, the idea of a human need is that it's necessary, right? And what that means is that without it, if it's not satisfied, people will develop pathologies, right? And so what happens when people develop pathologies? Well, they become either mentally or physically ill. What happens when people become mentally or physically ill? They become a burden or a danger to everyone around them. So once we understand that, it's no longer like an obligation to take care of everybody. It's something that we understand that it's in our benefit, right? So that's how we solve this problem. And then once people understand that, we can, in a decentralized fashion, just like we're doing now, without giving away our freedoms, because freedom is a fundamental human need, that without which we will develop pathologies, and that's why it's so important. And we don't have to give up any of our freedom in order for everyone to be fully satisfied and have all their needs met unconditionally. We just have to understand that that is necessary. And so there are different models of human needs, right? But this is a definition that I think is the basic key, because once we understand the definition, which is that it's required for us to not have develop pathologies, and that everyone has the same needs. What changes is how we satisfy them. Once we accept that framework, then we can use the methods of science to understand better what our needs are. And well, I was hoping to talk about this, but I guess we'll talk about it in the next program, which are research that's been done on this, and how emotional needs are absolutely biologically necessary. That they're not just something that we can overcome with an effort and stoicism. And then there are different frameworks, but you've always been a fan of the human givens framework, right?
Yeah. So I think when we talk about human needs, it might be useful to just have a bit of perspective in terms of science. Psychology in general is relatively young. It's a relatively young science, and it's also it's progressed, but it's been difficult progress also because what it's studying is very complex and very complicated, and it's so close to who we are that I think there's more biases involved. There can be political biases or all sorts of biases that can make it also harder to just study in a sort of objective way, other than it's complex and the biases, right? And but I think, and going back to what you said before about just increasing understanding, I think that in psychology there has been an increase of understanding, but part of the problem or the potential that there is that understanding hasn't necessarily been assimilated by society, right? And mm-hmm. This is sort of what we're talking about, right?
Yeah. Right. So it because it isn't. It's so sorry. What's the word? It's not in people's interest necessarily. Like it's convenient for them to not consider that, right? And to ignore it.
Yeah. Well, because it's again. So since it's as a study, since you're studying yourself, right? It's this idea of an anthropologist that's studying some other tribe, and he might talk about taboos and all sorts of things he might study, and then he might go back to his own tribe or his own society and not be able to see those same things. And maybe detecting those things or talking about those things would be against the interests of himself or herself or other parts of that society or certain institutions, or just uncomfortable. Right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, what's very clear is that, having to accept the responsibility of taking care of everybody else on the planet is a big burden, right? Like, and so it's understandable that people are trying to avoid that as much as possible.
Right. I mean, it's a big burden, but it's not something that an individual does. Like, I feel like it's a big burden, but it also somehow just also fits in with maybe just older or traditional or more intuitive ideas of what morality is and what people should do to help the people around them. Right. I think that the difficulty is when because you're thinking that, well, people think of it as the whole world, right? But if before all communication and transport was so easy, the idea of maybe helping the people around you wasn't that radical, possibly, because and maybe helping all the people that you are involved with, and having a certain standard of not hurting anyone you're involved with, and so on. To me, those kinds of things, they are sort of a part. Maybe there's cynicism, maybe there's, but they're sort of a part of our legal system and our legal systems and our moral systems in a way.
Yeah, absolutely, right? So like the fiduciary responsibility to maximize profit for shareholders, for instance, right? And I also think that it's ingrained in our system when we are de facto in a death match against everybody else, because we're in competition for resources, we're in competition for clients, we're in competition for jobs, right? And that's like on a smaller scale, but it's still real, right? It's still real if you lose your job to someone else because you are being, you're spending too much time with your family, for instance, or something like that, right? You lose your job, and that can scale downwards, and you can fall down progressively. But you can snowball down into a situation where you are excluded from the capacity to have your fundamental human needs satisfied. Especially, and that's something that people, like, if you see human needs as just food and water, then you don't really understand that, which is why I think it's so important to raise awareness also about fundamental emotional needs, because they're real, right? And they're real. And so what happens is that if you lose your job to someone else, or you lose clients and and you slowly get out of the loop, well, that's, you can get in a situation where you're not satisfying your needs. And so you want to avoid that at all costs. And so you can't be, you can only be concerned about the short-term gain, which is what we're, like I was saying earlier, like we don't have a choice. In the system that we're in now. So it's like this feedback, this negative feedback loop, which some people are calling like the race to the bottom, right? Yeah. So I think you need to go.
Yeah, I think that's a good note to end on, and we can continue in the next episode.
Okay, so thanks everyone for listening. Please look up prosocialize.org. Look at the links below, and tell us what you thought about this conversation. We would love to see your comments. So thank you, and just keep raising awareness about fundamental human needs. Enjoy a shared world.